Welcome to the City Lifestyle Podcast, Vegas edition, where we're covering the people, the places, and the events that make up our community. We're glad you're here. So we're back with another Sit Down with City Lifestyle Vegas edition podcast, and today's topic is one of Chad's favorite. It's tracking.
I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite.
As a data analytical hound,
okay,
I feel like
I enjoy it. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite.
I was going to say nerd, but this is like your favorite part of the...
I love talking about it. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, well, fun for you.
Yeah.
Fun for the data analytical driven types. But I guess just to kind of start, what are some of the foundations that you think that a client would need in terms of setting up their tracking to be able to have a successful advertising campaign?
Like some of the things or what they really should be doing?
What they really should be doing. That's why we're here.
Well, what's crazy is like we run a very print heavy solution, right? So like the magazine is the bulk of what we do. We have online, we have social, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
The number one thing every single business should have, and we've talked to clients about it, is website tracking, Google Analytics, any other software like Google Analytics, not to promote one over the other, but there needs to be a way to understand what's going on in your website. Because even though we have a print-heavy solution, we run social, like we link back to stuff, that is the number one thing I will always go to with the client to determine whether or not our print is working for them.
But Chad, I don't know how to do Google Analytics. How do I set that up?
Reach out to us. We will help you.
I mean, I say that only because, we're in this space. We've been in this space. But if you're not, Google Analytics can sound very daunting to some people if they've never looked at it before or whatnot. And ultimately, just for, to bring it down to a basic level, all Google Analytics is trying to do is exactly that. It's going to give you a report on what your website traffic is, what links they're clicking on within your page, what actions they're taking within your site. Where it's coming from. Exactly. So I think that, just having that baseline of knowledge is crucial. But, if somebody is saying, what about phone calls? Do you still think that phone calls are effective? Do you think that the website is a better representation? What do you think?
I think there are different levels for different businesses, right?
Okay.
If you can implement a call rail, call tracking software, if you want to drop phone numbers everywhere, pay for that, you can. I always have different tracking conversations based on the industry, right?
Okay.
So if we have a service-based industry, which is coming to your house, let's talk about where those jobs are actually being serviced at. If we have the ability to track on a CRM, like a medical CRM, where those patients residing. So there's a way to figure out more granular, what is the influence we're actually having. But if I'm sitting down with a client and they say they're not working, I've done this for years.
How many years?
A while. I'm trying to think.
I'm kidding.
But it's got to be probably a decade at this point.
I can't roast you too much. But
no, if a business is running a branding style campaign, whether it's print, radio, TV, anything like that, you always see spikes in direct traffic on a website. I've run this for multiple clients where we're running their Google ads, and all of a sudden they layer in a branding element, and their cost per click is going down, their click-through rate's going up because people are knowing the brand better. So when we're talking about tracking for whether it's us or anything else, there's 1,000 different ways to look at it, which is where I have fun because it's like a puzzle to me.
Yeah. Well, you had an interesting situation transpire with a client recently where they were actually able to see the direct correlation from when their article dropped and when they saw the spike.
Yeah. So what's funny to me is this client has tens of thousands of followers on social media. They've been running with me for a handful of months, kind of going back to our last episode, not quite at that repetition stage, right? We're getting at that point where it's not doing a lot. But I was okay, let's bring up your web traffic. So we start looking at it every single month where the magazine is dropping. So right around plus or minus 5 days around the first, we're seeing little bumps in direct traffic towards them. It's well, what else are you doing? Nothing really. And then all of a sudden we're looking at it and we get into March where we posted a collaborative post with them. So looking at both audiences, I've got 2,000 followers. They have tens of thousands of followers. And the largest single day spike of traffic came from that Instagram reel that we created and posted for them.
Which is crazy.
So it's about that new audience, but at the same time, it's okay, everything else is the brand building, right? They're seeing the ad, they're engaging, they're reading it, and then all of a sudden this happens, and you see this massive spike in traffic, which again, like you can't directly click on something from Instagram. So they went back to the link, they clicked on it, and then they got there. So it's all about what is that funnel, what is that touch point, but looking at, okay, if we're looking at everything we're doing, now all of a sudden, like we have these touch points, the conversation now turns into like, okay, what is the conversion side of this for you guys? So when they land on your website, what happens there? Because that's out of our control.
Yep.
Or if they call you, how does, like, if they call medical office, how long does it take to pick up the phone? Are they on hold forever? Are they actually asking for an appointment? Because when I've done digital marketing in the past, like they will get phone calls for Invisalign. How much does it cost? They give them a rough ballpark, click, done.
Yeah.
Not, how about we get you in to see the provider? Like, when can you come in type conversation. So a lot of times we'll go through this of, we're doing exactly what we said we would do. The ad's going there. We've talked about messaging. We're seeing this like movement to the next step of now we're on your social media. Now we're on your website. We've lost control there, but we still know what we're doing is making a positive impact.
I think you bring up a good point, because like we can lead them to the water, and then once they get there, then wherever we're taking them, you guys have got to make them drink, you know? Yeah. And it's interesting because we have a lot of clients that will track calls, and I have mixed feelings on having multiple phone numbers.
It's the last touch point attribution. It's not the best way to track.
Exactly. And the other thing that another question that comes up a lot for us, specifically in the print space, is the use of QR codes. So what are your thoughts on the QR codes?
I think they're valuable. I'm never going to hold like what we're doing to a QR code scan though, because we can look at it, we can see exactly what's going on, but from the end reader's perspective, what is my incentive to scan that code? Am I getting a discount? Am I going to see like a social media gallery? Is there like a before and after something? What are we putting in that QR code? And why is that reader going to take out their phone and scan it and engage with you on a different level? Versus the brand side of it, again, where we've talked about like, I see the brand, now all of a sudden I'm doing a search, now I click on your Google ad, and now I'm on the website. Versus, okay, yeah, I really want to dig into this right now and scan the code.
Well, and I had a client who just wanted to list a QR code, no phone number. Like they wanted to be able to track everything through that QR code. And one of the conversations I had to have was, some people will scan a QR code if they want more information. But I got to be honest with you, my mom's 68 years old. She's not scanning a QR code. She doesn't know how to. She doesn't want to. It's one more layer for her. Like, she's going to want to pick up the phone and make the call. So I think, all these different tactics that you can use to kind of layer in to track, you have to still make sure that you've got multiple touch points for different ways that people are going to engage with your brand. Some people are going to go to your social page. Some people are going to go to your website. Some might scan the QR code. Some will pick up the phone. But I think the underlying factor here is, to your point, like having that initial, whether it be Google Analytics or whatever that platform that you're going to use is set up, because you have to have a baseline of where you're starting to be able to track your growth, period. Yeah. And, I think a lot of times clients may not know exactly what their web traffic is on a monthly basis. They may not know where these people are coming from so far. We ask that question as part of our investigation, but sometimes they don't have the answer to that. So before you start anything, having whatever your tracking mechanism is going to be in place so that this is our baseline, this is where we're starting, so you can actually determine where those pops are coming from. Because especially now with all the different ways that people can engage with brands, these interactions are going to be coming from all these different touch points. So it's like you have to know, all right, where am I starting at from a social following? Where am I starting at with web traffic? It's not just going to be, let me just pick up the phone and call. It could be through different ways, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, in terms of just...
let me ask you this before we move on. Like, okay, how did you have this conversation before the magazine when you were in broadcast?
It was
what would you guys do? Yeah.
It's the same thing. The thing is, it's the same situation with broadcast, because it's like you're watching something on TV. So you still, they're seeing it, but like, it's funny because some people would want to use QR codes in commercials. Commercials were so fast. They're 15 or 30 seconds long. Like, who's going to pull out their phone?
Everyone refers back to that Super Bowl ad that was just the QR code.
It
was like the Super Bowl, right? Like, it's different.
It's different. Super Bowl is a whole different game. Yeah. And we could honestly do an entire podcast just on Super Bowl, maybe down the road. But
maybe like down towards Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, not when it's a million degrees and we're in the middle of June.
It's 115 degrees outside right now. It's 115
degrees outside. But that would be a really interesting one. But it's the same situation with print. It's like, you know, a lot of times in the broadcast space, people would track through phone calls or through web traffic. It's exactly the same way. So I think with all the digital options right now, that makes this whole tracking thing, in my opinion, a lot more confusing, because people will at times just gauge the success based on the number of clicks in a digital campaign. But somebody could have seen your ad on the page. Maybe they didn't take action that time. Maybe you're retargeting them with another ad, you know, down the road. Like, I feel like digital is up against it the hardest when it comes to tracking, because people look for that click-through rate. And if that click-through rate's not high, or if they didn't get enough clicks, they're like, forget it, it's out. The campaign might have still served its purpose. You're still delivering that impression. They're still seeing that impression. They're seeing your brand. But they may not have taken action in that exact moment. So to me, the digital space is very hard, because they are up against it every single month with these reports. At the same point in time, like, and I went on a little bit of a tangent for your question, so I apologize. But I think it's typical.
It's understood.
It's typical. Yeah. But I think no matter what media platform you're coming from, it's all the same. You know, it's all the same struggles. It's all the same challenges. It's all the same. And ultimately, what I would tell any advertiser is anything that you do to get your brand out there is helpful, right? At the end of the day, like, it raises all ships. Like, if you have a digital campaign that's speaking to your broadcast campaign, that's speaking to your print campaign, that's speaking to your billboard campaign, like, raise all ships. Yeah. And the more impressions that you can get, the more visibility you can get for your brand, it's all going to help.
With consistent branding, consistent messaging,
correct,
all that kind of stuff, yeah.
With all those things, exactly. But I guess to make the long story short, I just had a total brain fart moment.
Well, it happens. That's when you just keep going in circles over here. It happens.
I'm sorry.
So I'm going to ask you another question, though, right? So, like, as we have all these different things, and this doesn't really go to tracking, but it kind of does. So what are your thoughts on trying to catch, like, a viral meme or a viral moment versus, like, having a consistent laid out campaign? Yeah. And how do you track those two back together?
The viral campaigns are awesome, but they are few and far between. Yeah. Everybody wants to have a viral moment right now, because they do exist. We see them. Somebody could put up the most random thing on earth. And honestly, like, that's what makes them viral. It's usually the most random, obscure thing that is going to pop and get 1 million likes or whatever it is. You can't bank on something going viral, though. That's where the consistency comes into play. Like, you have to have your bread and butter for what's going to be your foundation of your message that you're putting out. And if you pick up something and something goes viral along the way, sweet, awesome, that's great. But it's not something that you can honestly bank on throughout the course of your campaign, you know?
Do you think that should even be included in, like, a typical marketing conversation? Because think about the businesses we traditionally work with our publications, right? Are they trying to go viral, or are they mainly trying to serve our local Las Vegas audience?
Well, they're trying to get the locals, and this is actually something that's come up recently. We had a client who had a viral video that was awesome. They had all these people that followed, but they didn't get one piece of actual business that came from that viral video.
What kind of business was it?
I think it was It was the home industry.
Really?
Wasn't it the home? I think it was the home industry.
I don't know if you told me about this. We'll need to dive in later on this.
Yeah, it was a home-related category. You can have a viral video, and it could do absolutely nothing for your business. And so at the end of the day, the goal of a marketing campaign is to, A, drive awareness, but you're driving awareness to drive sales. And if the viral campaign doesn't bring you anything in the end, it's like, did it actually serve the purpose that you were trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
So what do you think is one of the biggest mistakes that people will make when they're trying to set up, or when they're trying to track a campaign?
Going back to what I said earlier about phone calls, it's just the last touch point attribution, because it essentially gets rid of everything else you're doing. And before digital marketing, I actually ran essentially like a pay for performance campaign at a different market, different kind of medium. But we literally charged for phone calls out of this. And what's crazy about it is, like, we know we are taking the credit for the last touch point, the phone call that originated from that phone number, but it doesn't go to the magazine they were running in and the TV ads that they were running. Like, it was all segmented out. It was a home improvement company, all segmented out, and each last touch point was getting credit for it. So it doesn't build all those pieces together of, hey, I just saw your TV commercial, and then I heard you on the radio.
And then I passed the billboard.
And now I'm, like, looking at the newspaper, and then we're calling.
Yeah.
So it's like, I was happy because we were getting credit for it, but it's like all those different pieces, right? So when we're not able to go have a full conversation with what else are you guys doing? How are they working together? Like, are you running Google ads? Are you seeing better performance on that? And that's why at the beginning of the conversation today, I said the easiest way to track is like, where are the jobs happening? Where are your patients coming from? Like, let's get down to who those people actually are to figure out what is the influence happening, right?
Yeah, and we have a whole separate podcast on knowing your audience, which I think a lot of times when people get really deep into the weeds of these tracking mechanisms, they're surprised to see who their audience actually is. And sometimes the ages could be a little bit different. The income levels could be a little bit skewed because we have the assumption that our audience is just like us, and that's not always the case. So I think a lot of and tell me if you disagree on this, but a lot of the responsibility from the tracking standpoint does fall on the client. And, you know, when they're initially...
You.
What?
You're funny. Keep going.
Well, now I'm wondering...
We had a slight little mishap just a couple seconds ago. We're back. We're fine. Keep going.
Oh, my God. Just the roast. So, yes, I absolutely think that having that information is going to show you exactly where your gaps are. And it also shows you areas of opportunities where you can grow your business. If you're saying, hey, I am currently working with my core audience bases, 35 to 50, but I really want to reach, people that are 60 to 70 years old, and you have that baseline of information and you're not getting those people now. Okay, great. How can we pivot our strategy to try to target more of this audience that we want? Yeah. So I think it's a huge tool in showing you who you have now, but also being able to help guide you in where you need to go if you're trying to reach somebody outside of who you currently have.
So we've done, I think it was our first podcast, right? Like advertising doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we...
Straight for the jugular.
How do we go back into this conversation of like someone that's tried something or, I mean, they've tried this, it didn't work. They tried this, it didn't work, and then they just completely write it off. Like, how do you effectively challenge that thought process and like dig in to say like, okay, like, were you tracking it? Like, what happened? Like, walk me through that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, this is where my nerd comes in because I'm very curious. I love an investigation. If I was braver, I probably would have been like, a CSI person of some kind. But I love to dive in and figure out, okay, why didn't that work? And usually it goes back to what our other podcast was about, where it's like, it's one of three things. Like, either the target was off, the message didn't resonate, or there wasn't enough frequency for that campaign to actually land. But to your exact point, this is where you come into play. Without those tracking mechanisms, without that foundation laid down from the very beginning, it's really hard to say whether a campaign was or wasn't effective. Like, the bottom line, of course, is going to be, did it drive revenue? But with the revenue driving aspect of it, I'm so sorry. I'm falling apart.
Clean it up. Keep going. Clean it up.
But the point is, the bottom line is you want to drive revenue. But without having those mechanisms in place from the front end of it, you could be seeing huge spikes. And maybe it's just not the timeline of the sales cycle for your product to where they're actually going to pull the trigger right at that moment. But you could be seeing growth in your following, in your website, in all these different areas. But without like having that baseline from the beginning, you're going to miss that information.
So this is more of like just kind of a general question. Do you expect the average business owner to understand all this?
I honestly think that it's our job to help educate them.
How do we effectively do that? Like, how do you get someone to sit down and say, like, yes, I'm going to listen and trust you based on this information?
You have to relationship build, Chad.
Okay.
That's how that works.
How do you do that in a 20-minute meeting?
I mean, it's not an immediate process. We will ask questions to try to get more information, but they have to feel comfortable enough to share it with us. And they also have to know that we're on their side. We want the campaign to work just as much as they do. Yep. The last thing we want is to, run a campaign for a year and have it be a bust. Like, we're trying to build long-term relationships here. So you do that by asking questions on the front end, showing them that you're somebody that they can trust, building that relationship with them. But then also continuing the relationship build over time. There are so many people that will be like, great, I got the sale. See ya, and you'll never hear from them again. And the reality is, like, you got to stay in front of these people even after the campaign actually launches to be having these continued conversations to find out, how did this month look for you? What was your web traffic this month? What was the call volume this month? Did you gain additional followers? Like, we have to continue to have those ongoing conversations to be able to gauge the success of a campaign.
So if you were to be in front of a business owner right now, what do you think is the biggest piece of advice you could give them with your background on effectively tracking marketing campaigns?
Set up your tracking system, whether it is going to be Google Analytics or whatever that's going to be, and don't just set it and forget it. Monitor it on a monthly basis, because you will see trends. And if you're not yet, that's the other thing too. Like, if you're not tracking right now, that's okay. Like, I feel like sometimes people are embarrassed. They don't want to say it. It's okay. But just start doing it,
Yeah.
It's like when you're working out, if you miss a day or two and you're like, forget it, I'm over it. I stink. I can't do it. It's like, no, just get back on the horse and get back on track and start monitoring those things so that you can notice, you can identify those trends over time. Yeah. What about you?
I think it's looking at it from multiple angles. So are you looking at web traffic? Do you have that set up? Like, are you just asking your customers? Because again, that's going to be a last touch point. So it's like, where'd you find out? Well, Google. Okay, but like, how many touch points got there? How many different ways can you look at it? So again, dissecting a CRM. So pulling like zip codes, seeing what those people look like. And if you have the resources to do it, like, break that information down, because you're going to get a much better understanding of where your clients are coming from. But like we've talked about, like, where else can you draw from? So is there an audience you're missing? Like, the way we position it, it's like we're going after the highest, most affluent homes here in town and across the country for that matter. Are you reaching them effectively? Like, are they an ideal audience? Like, they have the disposable income. If you want to reach them, are you doing it? Or are you going after everyone and now you have wasted spend and like it's just not as effective as trying to be a little bit more targeted on it? So
I think that's a really good point, is just, are you casting too wide of a net? And that's the biggest difference between my previous space with broadcast versus the space we're in now. It's a lot more of a niche audience that we're targeting with the publication versus the broadcast where it was like, let's just reach everybody. The income level is different, the home value is different, the area is different. And again, without having that information from your analytics, you'd have no idea where your people are even coming from. So
I think that brings up a good point. There's a couple of medical offices right now that we're both kind of working on that are doing this really broad approach, right? But it's understanding, is that the most effective way you can do it? And by using that tracking and that information that's already there, like, we can educate them, yes or no, right? So
final thoughts on tracking.
If you're not doing it, start. I mean, I think that's it, right?
And don't be embarrassed to share with us if you're not yet. That's okay. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're trying to walk arm in arm with our partners right now, and we really do want to be an extension of their brand. So it's like, just be transparent with us with the information that you have, and let's navigate this space together. It can be confusing and it can be convoluted, and don't be afraid to tell us if you're not yet, and we'll help you.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
Well, thanks for watching with us today. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Deuces.